Ooh. All right. Welcome, everyone. It is a beautiful day. Kind of feels like spring in the air. We're happy to have you with us for our February Nutrition with Elena. So, Elena, I turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Today, we're going to talk about boosting our energy through nutrition. And I know this time of year, a lot of people are kind of needing a little bit of an energy boost, although I do feel like that little bit of warmer weather and sunshine probably did us all well today. Um, so today, we're going to make a lentil bowl. So we'll go through that. We're going to do that mostly at the end, and then we're going to do a nutty breakfast porridge. I'm going to start with just getting my mushrooms sauteed right now, and then they can saute while we're going through the slides. And then we'll do the recipes at the end. So I have my baby Bella mushrooms. You could also use like just the white oyster mushrooms. And I actually did learn that these are actually just white oyster mushrooms that just are allowed to grow a little longer, which I thought was really interesting. And I'm pretty sure that's accurate, but if it's not, you can tell me, but that's what I read. So I think that that's kind of fun. Um, and so I'm going to rinse these just because I do like to get like the extra little dirt off of them. And then I'm going to take out the stems. Do a quick rinse and stem removal. So these are just going to be toppings. We're going to use this as a topping for our lentil bowl. So we're going to just saute up about like the equivalent to like an 8-ounce container of the baby Bella mushrooms. This is a little bit of a larger container that I have. And some people just like to brush the mushrooms, and that's always fine too. But I find that a little bit of extra moisture just kind of helps with their like the cooking process. So I just tend to rinse mine. So I am gonna saute these in a little bit of olive oil, or I'm gonna use I have avocado, um, just because that can go to a little bit of a higher temperature than olive oil. You can also just saute them in water or broth. I'll probably end up adding a little bit of water because until these really start releasing their water, I don't know if you've ever sauteed mushrooms, but sometimes they start sticking and burning a little bit. So I'm just gonna do a tablespoon. I have my pan warming here, and I ended up getting this big container of J's the other day. It should hopefully last me a long time. But again, like you don't need to use the oil. You could just use a water or a broth. Great. So we're just gonna get these sauteing. I'm just gonna give this a little rinse because we're gonna cut some other things then at the end. And I don't know if I think we spoke before about mushrooms, but what we can do in the summertime or like when the sun's a little bit stronger. So typically, like with our latitude, starting in April, we can make vitamin D from the sunlight, and so can mushrooms. So I think we maybe mentioned this in a previous class, but if you weren't on, you can actually lay mushrooms on their underside out on like a tray in the sunlight for like 30 minutes. And the little gills, actually, that surface area absorbs vitamin D. And then you have like a little vitamin D rich mushroom to eat. So that's pretty cool because it's more, it's just like a supplement you're making yourself, right? And some people will even, take those mushrooms in the summer that they've done that too, and they'll dry them like in one of like their, like maybe they have a dehydrator or something like that, and they'll store them then for the winter so they can have a little bit of vitamin D in the winter. Now, it's definitely a lot of work to do all those things, but if that's something you're interested in, it could be a cool little project. Great. So I'm just going to be letting that saute while we're talking. So let me share my screen. Yeah, that view is a little weird, huh? Is that view okay now? Oh, that's right. I need to go to the slideshow. I guess that's what you had meant before, Erica, right? Does that look okay?
Yes, and now you're good.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to talk about boosting our energy. So let's talk a little bit about our macronutrients. We've been hearing that term a little bit if you're kind of like in the paying attention to kind of like nutrition sources and things. There's talk about macros, right? Um, Micronutrients. We'll talk about hydration and then just practical tips that we can incorporate. So what we know from, just the research, kind of all the years of experience we have like in nutrition science at this point, we need to balance out our macronutrients. So we shouldn't be like only eating one macronutrient. So for example, people are, going into ketosis, they're mostly eating fat. But for the vast majority of people, we find that balancing our micronutrients or macros is really the better option. And when we're looking for, if we're looking for carbohydrate rich foods, we want to look. So carbohydrates are a primary energy source for our bodies, but we want to choose the right ones. We want to choose whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. I am going to move my smoke alarm because it has a tendency to go off at bad times. Okay. Um, and then protein. So proteins help kind of give us sustained energy and also repair our muscles. Protein also has a way of slowing carbohydrate digestion. So we like for people to pair, some protein with their carbohydrates, right? And kind of balancing that out. So for protein sources, we can choose lean meat, fish, legumes, tofu, egg, all those good protein sources. And then fats. So fats provide us that long lasting energy. And, important to kind of incorporate those fat sources with our meals. So we are going to look to have, what we would consider kind of healthier fats. So if we're doing any oils, we might choose olive oil. We might look to nuts and seeds, avocados. And then, if we want to gear ourselves towards the omega-3 fats, fatty fish, walnuts, and flax seeds. Also, chia and hemp are good sources of our omega-3 fatty acids. And those specifically help to support our brain function and endurance. And I always love that like walnuts look like a little brain, right? I always think that that's super cool. you know, we have what we need in nature. So just kind of keeping an eye on these mushrooms, making sure they cook evenly. So consuming adequate protein. So we know that that can be challenging at certain times in our lives, right? Maybe if we're really busy and we're just kind of quick grabbing things on the go, or maybe our appetite is low, people may be going through treatment and maybe just have increased needs and aren't able to meet that as easily. So trying to incorporate some sort of protein into each meal and snack can be really helpful. And those high protein foods are things like eggs, tofu, poultry, fish, beef, pork, beans. So our plant sources would be beans, nuts, nut butters, seeds, and seed butters, soy milk and soy yogurts. And then obviously dairy products are also a good source of protein. Protein powder. So there is a place for some people, to consume some protein powder. And even with that recipe we're going to make today, that nutty breakfast porridge, that could be a place that you might put like half a scoop of protein powder into it. Um, there's a lot of emphasis, like there's more availability of kind of these one ingredient protein powders now, which I think are really nice. So you're not seeing like full list of ingredients. Like you might find just whey protein powder, and that's just like that milk protein in a powder. Also, I've seen almond protein powder and hemp protein powder. Just kind of keeping in mind that those two, the volume tends to be a little bit more for the same, for a similar amount of protein. So for a whey protein supplement, that volume is going to be a little bit less, but you can still obviously incorporate those other ones. And, I always tell people like maybe using like a half serving when you're adding it to a shake or like that porridge or something like that, because first off, it's going to save you some money. Second off, you're going to have other things in that recipe that are going to have protein. Like you can see with our nutty breakfast porridge, for example, just with that alone, made with soy milk, we have 14 grams of protein. So adding another like half serving, which would be 10 grams, would bring it up to like 24 grams, which would be great, for a meal. So now we'll chat a little bit about our B vitamins. So our um, micronutrients, that can kind of help us with energy. So B vitamins, we know, are essential for our energy metabolism. Um, Most people are getting enough if they're having a varied diet, with B12 being the exception. So um, as people age, they tend to not be able to make as much B12 as so the recommendation is probably for people over 50 to look into a B vitamin, a B12 supplement. Um, Also, for people that are vegan or vegetarian, they typically need to supplement with B12. And then also people that are on a proton pump inhibitor, maybe like omeprazole or something like that, they will need to supplement with a B12. Um, and some people just do like the once a week supplement of that, and that's usually enough. They'll usually do like 2,000 micrograms once a week, and usually it's like, I don't know, like Nature Made makes a nice sublingual one that has like 500 micrograms per serving, and like people might just split that into two doses and have it like pick a day of the week that they take that. And one day a week of it's usually enough to bring the levels up. I know some people kind of get themselves checked and might do like injections in their doctor's office and things like that. But for most people, that's fine. But also found in like fortified in some foods as well. So like nutritional yeast has a lot of B12. It'll be fortified in soy milks and almond milks and things like that. All right. And then iron. I don't know, has anybody ever had low iron levels over the course of their lives, right? Probably some of us have, and you know how it makes you feel, right? Pretty depleted, tired, headaches, all of those things. So iron helps prevent fatigue. It helps to carry our red blood cells. And it's found in, we have heme iron, which is in our like red meat typically. And then we have non-heme, and that's found in uh, lentils, spinach, like molasses has some dried fruits. And typically the non-heme iron, we want to pair with something that has vitamin C in it so that it's better absorbed for us. And then magnesium. So magnesium supports muscle and nerve function, and that's found in a lot of different foods, nuts, seeds, dark chocolate. Um, but that's something to kind of pay attention to. Are we getting enough magnesium? Some people aren't. And then some people will take like a small supplement for that. So caffeine. So, some of us might use caffeine to kind of boost energy. And, it certainly does do that for some people, can boost alertness and enhance physical performance if they have the right dose. But then we also have some drawbacks, which would be like can affect sleep, digestive issues, and then there can be some dependency issues with it. So really the best times to consume caffeine if we're consuming it is morning and early afternoon. And then, also looking into alternatives to caffeine for sustained energy. So getting enough sleep, having balanced, nutrient dense meals, like all of those things that are just important for our bodies. So there's plenty of energy drainers out there, right? So sugar, high sugar and processed foods. So when we eat something, say we wake up, I know we've talked about this before, we wake up and we have a donut. That blood sugar spikes up right away and it crashes down right away. And then we're like feeling kind of yucky, tired, because that blood sugar swing doesn't typically make us feel very energized. Another energy drainer would be alcohol, skipping meals. And sometimes people kind of get into that routine, especially if their appetite's low, they might be starting to skip meals and then they're losing weight. And then, that causes obviously a loss of energy, not taking in enough calories. So, all goes hand in hand. I see that quite a bit now with I work with, plenty of people now that are on the GLP-1 drugs and for weight loss. And, sometimes they're just not taking in enough calories and they're experiencing that fatigue, not being able to exercise because they don't have enough energy. So even if like people are taking those types of things, they need to be really on top of like, am I taking in enough nutrition throughout the day? Am I getting my calories, my protein? Am I losing weight too quickly? Like some people lose weight really quickly on those. And, it's best to kind of slow it down to kind of give, prevent like excessive muscle loss and, all the fatigue associated with all of that. And then hydration. So I don't know about you guys, but I tend to have a little trouble getting enough fluids in the winter just because I don't feel like I get as thirsty or it's just not, you know, as easy to drink lots of fluids, but, equally as important. So just kind of paying attention to that, making an effort to like, if we need to flavor the water, if we need to do different things to hydrate, trying to focus in on that. Um, so our best sources would be our water, herbal teas, hydrating foods. So like the fruits, the veggies, all of that, soups. So figuring out what's best tolerated to sip on. So like I said, plain water, especially like people maybe having issues with nausea and things, plain water doesn't always work the best, but adding some flavor can typically help with that. Keeping an eye on the urine to make sure that it's a straw color. So we don't want it to look like apple juice. We want it to look like that light straw color. And then obviously things that might, there's things that increase our fluid needs like fevers, sweating, obviously, if we're exercising, and then vomiting and diarrhea. And then blood glucose control. So I know we've talked a lot about this over the various classes, but really trying to focus on foods that are going to keep us having more of that balance versus that spike crash. And it's when that crash hits that we start to feel kind of yucky and fatigued because that's crashing the blood sugar lower than it was when we started eating. So that's often where we feel gross and want to eat something again to help us feel better. So those blood glucose swings can cause fatigue, and we want to choose foods that can balance things out. So choosing those intact grains. So those grains have all three parts. They're slower to digest. So things like brown rice, barley, farro, oat groats, quinoa. And then we want to limit sugary beverages because sugar in a beverage really spikes and crashes us, right away, typically. And then adding in beans and lentils. So I think we've talked in the past about that second meal effect with that study was done on lentils and it shows The people had, one group had a dinner without lentils, one group had a dinner with lentils. They both had the same breakfast that did not have beans or lentils in it. And the group that ate lentils at dinner had lower blood sugar after dinner and then also even after breakfast. So that second meal effect um, happens with beans. And they think it's, well, so the first meal that we have lower blood sugar, it's likely just because it's causing everything. It's just a little bit of a slower digestion when we eat more beans, like things just kind of leave more slowly. We're more balanced. We have all that fiber. And then for the second meal, that fiber is down in our like large intestine, providing fuel for the good bacteria, which then actually helps control our blood glucose levels. So that's likely why we have this second meal effect with beans. So really great thing to incorporate more of if you haven't already been doing that. And then this is just kind of a visual, like how do I balance out those macronutrients, right? And this is the American Institute for Cancer Research's um, New American Plate. So like it's a portion of the starch, it's mostly veggies, and then a smaller portion of the protein foods. Because that amount of protein, even though we're used to going out to dinner and having like a chicken breast that's like as big as our face, these little 4 ounce portion of chicken have like 30 grams of protein. So that's really all people need in a meal. Even when we're trying to boost protein, we don't need to like get over the top with our protein portions. Meal timing. So we know that meal timing can help just kind of giving us that energy throughout the day. It's just eating consistently. And that doesn't mean like every 2 hours. I mean, just kind of like eating your meals. If there's a certain window that's a little longer than others, incorporating in maybe a balanced snack in there. And really following that circadian rhythm, right? So when we kind of think back to humans like before artificial light and before snacks, like people weren't really like eating in the dark, right? They weren't like eating when, they weren't getting up and like eating at like or going to bed late and eating at like 10 p.m. snacks and things like that. They had just like a natural fast that would take them from dinner to breakfast. So that's always the goal I have with my clients. Like, let's just go from dinner to breakfast without eating anything. And it's typically like 12 to 14 hours. And that's like our natural time where our body is cleansing and, repairing, and all of these things are happening. We don't need to do these long, like intermittent fasts that some people might do, but that 12 to 14 hour window is just a good practice. Some practical tips we can play around with meal prep. So that's always really nice to kind of just have some things ready to go. Simple swaps. So we might choose whole fruit instead of juice. We might choose an intact grain over a processed, um, you know, white grain. And then just having some like quick and energizing meal and snack ideas. So I like for, some ideas would be like some roasted beans or, maybe like a half portion of nuts with a small piece of fruit, trying to like find little things like that are going to balance us. They're not going to spike and crash our blood sugar. Um, Hummus and veggies, something like that for snacks. Obviously, there's a bunch of recipe websites. So I always like some of these. And now we'll do our recipes. Does anybody have any questions on those slides? Great. So our mushrooms are done. So what I did ahead of time, I made my lentils. So we just did green lentils for this. So they're the like green or brown, whatever you want to call them. What I like about those is they hold their shape. So I know we've done the red split lentils with recipes in the past, and those just really don't hold their shape, but these do. So for a lentil bowl, these are nice. I also like to sometimes use like the black beluga lentils. So they almost look like caviar, which is why they call them beluga. They're a little harder to find, but they're really nice too, and they really hold their texture. Great. So we're going to work with that. Let's make our dressing. We'll do our dressing next. So I don't know if you guys have ever made or had a tahini dressing before, but tahini is amazing. It's so just like so flavorful. So I'm going to get my recipe open so we can follow it. All right. So we'll do a quarter cup of tahini. And you can typically find tahini, like I found mine at Giant. Say most stores like that carry it. Aldi's does not carry it. But you could also get it if you have any type of um like an ethnic type market, like maybe like up here I have like a Syrian market and they have like a ton of different tahini in there. And often places like that are, you can get things for really good prices too. Like a lot of times they'll have nice bulk items. So they'll buy like huge volumes of, whatever grains, nuts, seeds, and then they'll portion them out in little containers and like charge by the pound, however they charge. I love going to places like that. And I was even going to mention about like the nuts and things for the next recipe. We'll talk about that, but that could be a place where you could get like cheaper nuts at. So we did a quarter cup of tahini. We're going to do 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. I think we talked before. I typically don't ever have a juicer, so I just use a fork and I just work it around the sides. Pretty sure we've done this in class before. Gets a ton of juice out and it's just really easy. Yeah, I think we did a whole recipe on a whole web class on kitchen tools, and we definitely showed all the things we can do with a fork. I remember that now. I teach classes like at my other job, and I forget what I do for each one sometimes. All right, so we're gonna do 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Great. We're gonna add a quarter cup of water, and then I'll probably add a little bit more because I do like this to be a little bit thinner and a little bit more like a drizzle on this lentil bowl. So we'll mix this and we'll see how it is. And then if you find that it thickens up while it's in the fridge, you can always add more water to it. I did a half. When I did my trial, I'm pretty sure I just did a half recipe because this is looking very, very almost full to the top. So I think we mentioned like with salad dressings, we can always use water and that helps to kind of like cut down the oil that people might be adding. And you can always adjust recipes. We're going to do a teaspoon of maple syrup. My husband spent this whole weekend boiling maple sap. The amount of work that goes into maple syrup is next level, that's for sure. And I'm just using a half teaspoon measuring tool. So honestly, that little tiny bit of sweetener is all you're going to need. Always cut down in salad, like dressing recipes, always cut down the sweetener. Usually like a teaspoon is all you really ever need. And then we're going to do a half teaspoon of garlic powder. And again, I have the wrong measurements. I'm just doing two. And then we're going to do an eighth teaspoon of salt. This is seriously so good. You could add this on top of like roasted vegetables. You're doing like a falafel something. This is always amazing on top of falafel. This is a good texture, actually. This is pretty loose. Perfect. Great. All right, so let's just chop our veggies and then we'll build our little lentil bowl. So I have pepper, and you can like add whatever vegetables you like into this. And you could certainly add a grain too if you wanted to. I'm just gonna do some chopped red pepper. I think even eating this with like some homemade, not homemade, but like some whole wheat pita or flatbread or something, like a little portion of that would be really nice. And then we have some cucumber. And we're gonna get a bowl. We're just gonna do about 3/4 of a cup of our lentils. So do our lentils. We're gonna do just kind of a little bit of, just kind of go around the side with red pepper, cucumber. We'll do some of our roasted mushrooms. Do some hemp hearts. So this is the recipe basically makes 4 servings. So we're gonna do a tablespoon of hemp hearts. And then we're gonna put in, drizzle in some of our salad dressing. And then for a little bit of extra sweetness, we're gonna just drizzle a little bit of the balsamic glaze. Don't know if anybody's ever used balsamic glaze, but it's just like balsamic vinegar that's been reduced down. It's like a little reduction. So that's our lentil bowl. And as you can see on the recipe, has 21 grams of protein, 15 grams of fiber. So it's pretty heavy on the fiber, very little sodium. So it's a really nice option. Great. So now we'll prepare our nutty breakfast porridge. Okay. I'm just going to move this out of the way. So we're first going to pulse down our um, pecans and our walnuts. Now this recipe too, if you need to adjust anything, I know pecans can be a little bit pricier. So if you'd rather just do the double the walnuts, that's fine too. So we're gonna do a quarter cup of pecans. We're gonna do a quarter cup of walnuts. Now I think these, I don't know if anybody has, or anybody goes to BJ's, but they have these giant 2 pound bags of shelled walnuts there. They used to be $5.99. Now they're $7.99, but still, I think they're like half the price of what they are, like in a different type of grocery store. If you have any friends that go to BJ's, that might be something to pick up. And then you can keep them in the freezer if you don't think you're going to use them right away. I mean, obviously, you're not going to use them right away, but it extends their life if you keep them in the freezer. Great. So let's get this. I'm just going to mute myself real quick. Okay. So then we're just going to start adding our ingredients into a mason jar. I did just pick this. We'll see if everything fits through this little funnel that I just was like, I needed a funnel. So I got one at the Dollar Tree yesterday. Like, I just can't. Funnels come in such, they're so handy to have on hand. And I used the other one for some animal medications. I'm like, I'm not using this for food anymore. So that's for the oats, but hopefully the rest of our ingredients will go through smoothly. Oh my goodness, they're getting stuck. There we go. So this recipe is pretty cool because we're going to mix up like a bigger batch and then you can just keep, you can keep, oh my goodness, making a mess over here. You can keep, it in a container and then just pull from it as you want to make the porridge. This is a bust. Got it. Once this comes through. Sorry, everybody. We'll just make a mess. That's fine. All right. So we have our nuts. Now we're going to add some seeds. So we're going to do a quarter cup of hemp seeds. And they're the hemp parts. They do sell the seeds. So these are the inside of the hemp seed. They do sell them, but they're very hard. I don't know if anybody's bought the actual hemp seeds before, but they're like these little triangular, extremely hard shelled seeds. So I don't really recommend. They're hard to work with. So I usually just use the hemp parts. And then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed. And again, if you don't have some of these ingredients, like the hemp part, you could always just add in like more seed or a little bit more of something else, a little more oats or something. Because this could be a little bit of an expensive recipe if you don't have everything on hand. And then we're going to do 2 tablespoons of almond flour. 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder. We use the spoon for that. Something like cocoa powder. And then we're going to do some chopped dates. And between the dates and the um, strawberries, it's really like gives it a nice sweet flavor. So I'm just gonna chop the dates. We're just gonna do 4. If you like things a little bit sweeter, you can do more. Again, I have my giant date container. Don't worry, I didn't bill these giant bags of nuts and dried fruit area. All right.
They would last us a while, right?
Those are my own stash. Yeah, that's like the only reason I keep my BJ's membership is to get the propane for boiling the maple sap and then for the nuts and seeds and fruit, dried fruit. These dates are a little drier from there. I've never had those before. The other ones have a little bit of a nicer sticky texture. I feel like we talked about dates and their texture before, right? I feel like that was a topic in class at some point. Somebody liked certain types of dates. But yeah, this is definitely enough sweetness for this recipe, I think. But you can always add another chopped date to it if you feel like it's not quite sweet enough for you. It's like always a nice surprise when you bite into a date when you're eating it. So let me get the lid on here and I'm just going to shake it up. That's so nice. You could just like store it like this in your pantry, right? And I'm going to show you how I'm going to heat it up just so we can kind of see what it looks like after. So we're just going to take a quarter. If we do a half cup of it, we'll do a half cup. And we're going to do a half cup of soy milk. And I'm going to heat it for about 2 minutes. So I'm going to stop it midway through because it does tend to kind of like overflow a little bit. I'll put it on another plate. I think heating it on the stove would work out probably a little better because it does overflow. Now I'm going to cut up a couple strawberries for the top. You can use other types of fruit too, whatever you like. Let me just stop it and put it back on. Great. So while that's going, does anybody have any questions? You can see that this recipe also has a lot of fiber, right? About 8 grams, which is nice. This ends up being like a little bit higher in fat because of the nuts, but it's all like healthy fat and good. And I think it's great for people if like anybody has trouble kind of like chewing nuts. This is a really nice way to get those in, and it's a super soft way to eat them, which is nice. Yeah. I, So good with that cocoa powder. So you can kind of see that it's a little bit loose, but it's really yummy. And then, like I said, you could just add your strawberries to the top, and you have a nice, tasty little porridge. Wonderful. Does anybody have any questions? Quiet group today. That's all right. I think that I can't remember what our topic is next month. Do you remember, Erica? We're always not remembering. Good. Well,